I spent $120,000 on a family vacation to Hawaii. I paid for the first-class tickets, the oceanfront suites, and even the new wardrobe my daughter-in-law insisted she needed. But at the airport, standing in front of the check-in counter, my son looked me in the eye and said, "I forgot to buy you a ticket, Dad. Just go home." They planned to leave me behind from the very beginning. The next day, I had 135 missed calls from them. Before I tell you how I made them regret every single second of their betrayal, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you think family loyalty should be a two-way street. I am George Caldwell, 70 years old, and for the last decade, I have let my family believe I am just a tired, retired old man who exists solely to sign checks. Standing in the middle of Terminal 4 at Los Angeles International Airport, I looked less like the former CEO of a global shipping logistics empire and more like a glorified porter. My hands were gripping the handles of two massive Louis Vuitton trunks, the leather sticky against my palms from the nervous sweat I had not realized I was producing. These were not my bags. My belongings fit into a modest carry-on that was currently slung over my shoulder, forgotten and heavy. The trunks belonged to Monica, my daughter-in-law. She was standing 10 feet away, tapping furiously on her phone, her thumb scrolling through Instagram as if the physical world around her was merely a distraction. Bradley, my son, was manic. That is the only word to describe him. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet, his designer sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. He held a stack of passports in his hand, fanning them out like a poker player holding a royal flush. He was 40 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a teenager who had just stolen his parents' liquor cabinet key. He was high on the adrenaline of spending money that he had not earned. I watched him herd his two children, my grandchildren, toward the priority lane. They were wearing noise-canceling headphones, completely partially oblivious to my presence. I had paid for those headphones too. I had paid for everything. This trip was supposed to be special. It was the 40th anniversary of the day I married my late wife, Sarah. We had always promised each other we would take the whole family to Maui when we turned 70. Sarah was gone, taken by a stroke 3 years ago, but I wanted to keep the promise. I transferred $120,000 to Bradley's account 2 weeks ago. I told him to handle the logistics. I told him to make it perfect. I wanted to see my grandchildren playing in the sand where their grandmother used to walk. I wanted to feel like a patriarch, not a bank vault. The line for first-class check-in was short. The agent behind the counter, a woman with tired eyes and a forced smile, beckoned us forward. Bradley stepped up, his chest puffed out. He slapped the passports onto the counter with a thud that echoed his arrogance. "5 for Honolulu," he announced loud enough for the people in economy to hear. He wanted them to look. He wanted them to envy him. I shuffled forward, dragging Monica's heavy trunks. The wheels were misaligned, wobbling and fighting me with every step. I waited for Bradley to wave me over, to take the bags, to hand me my boarding pass. But he did not turn around. He was busy charming the agent, making jokes about the weather, about how much luggage his wife packed. Monica finally looked up from her phone, rolled her eyes at my slow pace, and sighed. "Hurry up, George," she snapped. She never called me Dad. It was always George, said with the same tone one uses to scold a slow dog. "We are going to miss the lounge access if you keep moving at a snail's pace." I finally reached the counter, breathless. The agent scanned the passports, one by one. Bradley, Monica, the 2 kids, the nanny. "I see 5 passengers here, Mr. Caldwell," the agent said, typing on her keyboard. "But I see 6 people in your party." She looked at me. I looked at Bradley. For a second, I thought it was a simple mistake, a clerical error. Bradley was disorganized. He had always been the kind of boy who lost his homework, who forgot to pay parking tickets until the car was booted. I stepped forward, reaching into my jacket pocket for my ID, ready to sort it out. "Oh, right," Bradley said. His voice changed. It dropped an octave, losing its manic joy and taking on a tone of rehearsed sorrow. He turned to me, and for the first time that morning, he looked me in the eye. But there was no panic in his gaze. There was only a cold, flat emptiness. "Dad, I am so sorry." The world seemed to stop. The noise of the terminal, the announcements over the intercom, the crying babies, it all faded into a dull hum. "What do you mean?" I asked. My voice was steady, steadier than I felt. "I completely forgot to book your ticket," Bradley said. He scratched the back of his neck, a gesture he had used since he was 6 years old whenever he was lying. "I was so focused on the kids and Monica's upgrades and the hotel coordination, it just slipped my mind. I thought Monica did it. Monica thought I did it. It is a total disaster." He did not look like it was a disaster. He looked like he was reading a script he had memorized in the car ride over. Monica chimed in, stepping up beside him. She put a hand on his arm, a gesture of support for him, not me. "Honestly, George, it might be for the best. You know how your blood pressure gets on long flights. And the heat in Hawaii is terrible this time of year. You would just be miserable and stuck in the hotel room anyway." The agent behind the counter stopped typing. She looked from Bradley to me, her eyes widening. She saw it. She saw the cruelty. "I can check availability on the flight, sir," the agent offered gently. "There are still seats in first class. If you have a card, we can book it right now." "No," Bradley cut her off sharply. He did not even let me speak. "Dad does not have his wallet. He left it at home. And honestly, it is too much stress for him. He gets confused easily." I gripped the handle of my carry-on bag. Confused? I was the man who negotiated trade deals with the toughest union leaders in Detroit. I was the man who navigated the 2008 financial crisis without laying off a single employee. But to my son, I was just a senile old prop that had served its purpose. Bradley turned back to me, putting a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, like a shackle. "Look, Dad, just take an Uber home. Relax, enjoy the quiet house. We will FaceTime you when we get to the beach. It will be like you are there with us, but without the sunburn. Go home, get some rest. We will bring you back a souvenir." He signaled to the porter to take the bags from my hands. Monica's bags. They took the luggage I had dragged for them, threw it onto the conveyor belt, and watched it disappear. Then, without waiting for my response, without a hug, without a single backward glance, Bradley grabbed Monica's hand and walked toward the security checkpoint. I stood there, frozen. I watched my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had bailed out of debt 3 times, walk away from me as if I were a piece of trash he had successfully tossed into a bin. "Sir," the agent whispered, "are you okay? Do you want me to call someone?" I blinked, clearing the image of their retreating backs from my mind. I stood up straighter. The slump in my shoulders vanished. I adjusted my collar. "No, thank you," I said, my voice crisp and clear. "I am perfectly fine. In fact, I have never been more clear-headed in my life." I did not call an Uber. I walked out of the terminal, the automatic doors sliding open to hit me with the smoggy, warm air of Los Angeles. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number I had not used in months. "Silas," I said when the line connected. "Mr. Caldwell?" The voice on the other end was rough, surprised. "I thought you were on a plane to Maui, sir." "Plans have changed, Silas. Pick me up at Terminal 4. Bring the Phantom. And Silas, do not tell anyone you are coming." 20 minutes later, the extended wheelbase Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb. It was a car Bradley had begged me to sell, claiming it was ostentatious and that I needed the liquidity. I had told him I sold it. I lied. I kept it in a private garage across town, maintained by Silas, my driver and security chief for 30 years. Silas stepped out, a mountain of a man in a black suit. He took my small bag without a word, opened the rear door, and waited until I was settled in the deep leather seat before closing it. The silence inside the car was absolute. It was a sanctuary. "Home, sir?" Silas asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Yes, Silas, but take the scenic route. I have some thinking to do." As the car glided onto the highway, away from the airport, the shock began to wear off, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. It was not the money. I had millions. The $120,000 was a drop in the ocean. It was the disrespect. It was the realization that my presence was an inconvenience to their happiness. They wanted my money, but they wanted me dead, or at least invisible. We arrived at the estate an hour later. The house was massive, a sprawling Mediterranean mansion on the cliffs of Malibu. It was the house Sarah and I had built. Now, it felt like a mausoleum. Bradley and Monica lived in the East Wing, rent-free, of course. I lived in the West Wing. We shared the kitchen, but we lived in different worlds. I walked into the foyer. It was silent. The staff had been given the week off, paid for by me, so the family could have privacy. Privacy. The irony was bitter. I did not go to my bedroom to cry. I did not go to the kitchen to make tea. I went straight to the library. This was my command center. It was the one room in the house Bradley was forbidden to enter, though I knew he had tried to pick the lock more than once. I verified my fingerprint on the scanner, and the heavy oak door clicked open. I sat at my mahogany desk and opened my laptop. I was retired, yes, but I was not dead. I still maintained administrative access to every single family account. Bradley thought he was clever. He thought because I let him use the secondary credit cards, he had control. He thought because I signed the power of attorney for specific medical decisions, he owned me. I logged into the banking portal. My fingers flew across the keys. I needed to see the damage. I needed to see the truth. The transaction history for the last 2 weeks loaded on the screen. I scrolled down, my eyes narrowing behind my reading glasses. There it was. The transfer of $120,000. But that was just the beginning. I clicked on the details for the flight booking. 5 tickets, first class, round trip. Total cost, $45,000. Wait, I did the math. $45,000. Where was the rest of the money? I opened the credit card statement for the black card I had given Bradley for emergencies. 4 Seasons Maui. The charge was pending, but the hold was massive. He had not just booked rooms. He had booked the Miley Presidential Suite. $25,000 a night. For 7 nights. That was $175,000 plus taxes. He had already blown through the cash transfer and was now eating into my credit line. But as I dug deeper, the pain in my chest was replaced by a chill that froze my blood. I found an email draft in the synchronized family cloud account. Bradley was lazy. He never logged out of the shared iPad in the library. The email was addressed to a firm called Apex Capital. I knew them. They were vulture capitalists, bottom feeders who bought distressed assets, stripped them for parts, and laid off thousands of workers. Subject: Sale of Caldwell Logistics Holdings. I clicked it open, my hand trembling slightly. Not from age, but from fury. Dear Mr. Sterling, the email read, my father is not in a position to manage the company anymore. His cognitive decline is accelerating. I have the medical power of attorney and the proxy votes. I am ready to close the deal in Hawaii. I will bring the signed documents. We can meet at the resort on Tuesday. I am willing to let the controlling stake go for $5 million cash if we can close immediately. I need the liquidity for a new venture. $5 million. The company was worth $50 million conservatively. My son was planning to sell my life's work, the legacy I built from a single truck, for 10 cents on the dollar, just so he could pay off his gambling debts and live like a king for a year. And he was going to use a fake diagnosis of dementia to do it. That was why he left me behind. It wasn't about the ticket. It wasn't about my blood pressure. It was about the meeting. He couldn't sell the company if I was there. He needed me out of the way, confused, and isolated in Los Angeles while he played the big shot in Maui. He wanted to claim I was too sick to travel, too sick to think, while he signed away my name. I leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked. I looked at the picture of Sarah on my desk. She was smiling, her eyes full of the kindness I had always tried to emulate. I tried, Sarah. I whispered to the empty room. I tried to be the father you wanted me to be. I gave him chance after chance. I forgave the debts. I forgave the insults. But this is not a mistake. This is an execution. I picked up my phone. I dialed Catherine Ross, my personal attorney and the most terrifying woman in California contract law. George? She answered on the first ring. Everything okay? I thought you were sipping Mai Tais. Plans changed, Catherine, I said. My voice was low, devoid of any warmth. Prepare the jet. I am going to Hawaii. There was a pause. The jet? George, that costs 20 grand to fuel up on short notice. Do it, I commanded. And Catherine, I want you to initiate Protocol 0 on Bradley's accounts. But do not execute it yet. I want everything queued up. Freeze the trust fund. Flag the credit cards as stolen. Revoke his access to the corporate server. Protocol 0? Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. George, that is the nuclear option. That leaves him with nothing. He won't be able to buy a pack of gum. Exactly, I said. He wanted to treat me like a ghost? Fine. I will show him what it is like to be invisible. I will meet you at the private hangar in 2 hours. Bring the original incorporation documents. And bring a notary. We are going to have a board meeting. I hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the ocean. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the water. My son thought he had won. He thought he was sipping champagne in paradise, free of his burden. He had no idea that the burden was coming for him, and I was bringing hell with me. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I bypassed the closet full of comfortable retirement clothes, the beige cardigans and soft slacks Monica said made me look approachable. Instead, I walked to the back of the walk-in closet, to the garment bag I had not unzipped in 5 years. I pulled out my bespoke Italian suit. Charcoal gray, sharp as a razor blade. It still fit perfectly. I put on my cufflinks, the gold ones with the family crest. I tied my tie with a double Windsor knot. I looked in the mirror. The tired old man from the airport was gone. George Caldwell, the shark of the shipping industry, stared back. I grabbed my briefcase. I walked down the stairs, my footsteps echoing with purpose. Silas was waiting by the door. He saw the suit. He saw the look in my eyes. He did not say a word. He just opened the door. "Let's go to the airport, Silas," I said. "I have a flight to catch, and this time I am not sitting in the back." The flight on my private Gulfstream was smoother than any commercial airliner. I spent the 5 hours not sleeping, but strategizing. I reviewed the legal documents Catherine sent to my tablet. I mapped out Bradley's itinerary based on his social media posts. He was predictable. He would be at the resort's most expensive restaurant tonight, showing off for the vulture investors. We landed in Maui just as the sun was dipping below the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of plumeria and salt. A black SUV was waiting on the tarmac. "Take me to the Four Seasons," I told the driver, "but use the service entrance." I arrived at the hotel like a phantom. I did not go to the front desk. I went straight to the general manager's office. Mr. Henderson was a man I had hired straight out of college 20 years ago. I had paid for his mother's cancer treatment when insurance denied it. He owed me. "Mr. Caldwell," Henderson stammered as I walked into his office unannounced. He dropped the pen he was holding. I did not know you were coming." "Your son checked in yesterday. He said you were unwell." "Does he?" I said, sitting down in the chair opposite him without waiting for an invitation. "Pull up his folio, Henderson. I want to see what my son is spending my money on." Henderson hesitated, then typed into his computer. His face paled. "Sir, he has booked the Royal Suite. He has ordered 3 bottles of Petrus. He has booked a private yacht charter for tomorrow. The total bill is currently sitting at $42,000. "And the payment method?" I asked. "The black card ending in 4098. Under your name, sir." I nodded slowly. "Excellent. Henderson, I need a favor." "Anything, Mr. Caldwell." "I want you to cancel the Royal Suite effective tomorrow morning. Move his belongings to a standard room, garden view. No, better yet, the one facing the parking lot." Henderson's eyes widened. "Sir, he will be furious." "Let him be furious. And Henderson, when he tries to pay for dinner tonight, decline the card." "Decline it? But, sir, the credit limit is—" "I am reporting the card stolen," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "Right now. When he hands that card to the waiter, I want the system to flash red. I want the police called if he makes a scene. Do you understand?" Henderson swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now, give me the key to the villa directly across from the Royal Suite. I want to watch." 10 minutes later, I was standing on the balcony of a private villa, looking across the manicured gardens. I raised my binoculars. There they were, on the terrace of the Royal Suite. Bradley was holding a glass of wine, laughing, his head thrown back. Monica was taking a selfie with the sunset. They looked like royalty. They looked untouchable. I dialed the number for the credit card fraud department. "Identity verification," the automated voice requested. I spoke my social security number. I spoke my password. "Report a card lost or stolen," I said clearly. "Which card would you like to report?" "The black onyx, ending in 4098. Card reported. Would you like to cancel all authorized user cards associated with this account? Yes, I said. Cancel them all. Immediate effect. Transaction complete. I lowered the phone. Across the garden, Bradley was raising his glass for a toast. He had no idea that the glass he was holding was about to become the most expensive drink of his life. He had no idea that the ATM in his pocket had just turned into a piece of useless plastic. I watched him take a sip. Enjoy it, son, I whispered, because the hangover is going to be brutal. I turned back into the room where Catherine was setting up a makeshift war room on the dining table. She had printed out the revocation of power of attorney documents. Ready for dinner? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Not yet, I said. Let them eat first. I want them full and happy before we pull the rug out. Tonight, we watch. Tomorrow, we hunt. I sat down in the dark, my eyes fixed on the lit windows of my son's suite. The game had begun. And unlike Bradley, I never played to tie. I played to wipe the board clean. Hawaii smells like hibiscus and money. To most tourists, it is the scent of paradise, a sweet perfume that masks the reality of life. But as my private jet taxied to the far end of the tarmac at Kahului Airport, away from the commercial terminals where happy families were deplaning in their floral shirts, I did not smell paradise. I smelled the distinct, metallic scent of a trap snapping shut. I was not here to vacation. I was here to hunt. The humidity hit me the moment the cabin door opened. A heavy blanket of tropical air that usually relaxed my shoulders. Today, it only sharpened my focus. I bypassed the main terminal entirely. A black SUV with tinted windows was waiting on the tarmac, engine idling, the air conditioning already blasting. I did not speak to the driver. I simply slid into the back seat and watched the cane fields blur past as we sped toward Wailea. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Catherine, confirming that the legal documents were ready for digital signature. I ignored it. Paperwork could wait. First, I needed eyes on the target. We pulled into the service entrance of the Four Seasons, avoiding the grand lobby with its open-air fountains and lay greeting ceremonies. I was a ghost. Ghosts do not wear leis. I walked through the kitchen, the staff parting like water around a stone. They knew who I was. I had owned a controlling interest in the logistics company that supplied 70% of the food to this island for 3 decades. I knew the back of the house better than the front. I found Henderson in his office, staring at a spreadsheet that likely made no sense to him in his current state of panic. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over when I entered. He looked older than I remembered, his hairline receding, but the fear in his eyes was fresh. He started to stammer an apology, perhaps thinking I was here to audit his performance, but I held up a hand. Silence was a weapon I had perfected over 40 years in the boardroom. I let him sweat for a moment, letting the hum of the server rack in the corner fill the room. I need Villa 4, I said, my voice low and devoid of pleasantries. Henderson blinked, confusion warring with relief. Villa 4? But, Mr. Caldwell, that unit is currently undergoing maintenance. The air conditioning is spotty, and the view is partially obstructed by the palms. We have the presidential suite available if you want to if you want to move your son. Leave my son exactly where he is, I commanded, stepping closer to his desk. I want Villa 4 because it has a direct line of sight to the terrace of the royal suite. I do not want luxury, Henderson. I want a vantage point. And I want you to make sure that no member of your staff acknowledges my presence. To the world, George Caldwell is sitting in a lonely mansion in Los Angeles, probably crying into his oatmeal. Do you understand? He nodded vigorously. I knew he would. I had paid for his mother's experimental leukemia treatment 6 years ago when his insurance company had drafted a rejection letter. Loyalty is a commodity, and I had purchased his a long time ago. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the darkened living room of Villa 4. I had left the lights off. The curtains were drawn, leaving only a sliver of space open. Through that gap, armed with a pair of high-powered marine binoculars I had taken from the yacht supplies, I watched the show. And what a show it was. Across the manicured lawn, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, my son and his wife were performing. That is the only word for it. They were on the sprawling terrace of the Royal Suite, the most expensive accommodation on the island. Bradley was wearing a white linen shirt that I knew cost $600, unbuttoned halfway down his chest. He held a glass of champagne in one hand and his phone in the other. He was filming himself. I adjusted the focus on the binoculars. I could see the screen of his phone. He was live streaming. I pulled up Instagram on my own phone, mute, just to see what he was saying. The delay was only a few seconds. "What's up, guys?" Bradley's voice tinny through my phone speaker. "Just touched down in Maui. You know how we do it. Hard work pays off. The grind never stops, but sometimes you have to treat yourself to the best. Hashtag self-made. Hashtag crypto king. Hashtag family vacation. Self-made. The bile rose in my throat. The only thing Bradley had ever made was a mess. He panned the camera to Monica, who was posing on the lounge chair, pretending to read a book she was holding upside down. She blew a kiss to the camera. "We missed Grandpa," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But he insisted we go without him. He hates the heat. We love you, George." I lowered the phone, but kept the binoculars raised. The moment the camera cut off, the smiles vanished from their faces instantly. It was like watching a light switch flip. Bradley slumped into a chair, chugging the rest of his champagne in one gulp. Monica threw the book onto the table and shouted something at the nanny, who was trying to wrangle my grandchildren in the background. The mask of the happy, successful couple had fallen, revealing the ugly, hollow creatures underneath. I watched them for an hour. I watched them order room service, sending dishes back because they weren't plated correctly. I watched Bradley scream at a waiter because the ice in his bucket had melted too quickly. I watched them ignore their children, handing them iPads so they could go back to staring at their own reflections in the glass doors. It was a masterclass in narcissism. But I needed more. I needed to know their end game. I knew about the sale of the company from the emails, but I needed to hear it from his lips. I needed to hear the intent. Night fell. The torches around the resort were lit, casting flickering shadows across the gardens. The wind shifted, carrying sound from their terrace directly toward my hidden position. They were drunk now. I could tell by the way Bradley was gesturing, his movements sloppy and exaggerated. They had moved to the edge of the balcony, leaning over the railing, looking down at the infinity pool below. I slid the glass door of my villa open just an inch more. The tropical breeze carried their voices clearly over the quiet hum of the resort. "Guy is going to be there at 10 tomorrow," Bradley was saying, his voice slurring slightly. "I told you, babe, it is a done deal. Sterling is bringing the cashier's check, $5 million. Boom, just like that." $5 million, Monica laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "That is it? I thought the old bat's company was worth 10 times that." "It is," Bradley scoffed, "but liquidating it properly takes time. We have to do audits, shareholder meetings, all that bureaucratic garbage. If I sell the controlling stake privately, under the table, we get the cash now." Who cares if the company gets stripped for parts? I will be sipping mojitos on a yacht in the Mediterranean while the employees are filing for unemployment. I gripped the binoculars so hard my knuckles turned white. He was not just selling my company. He was selling the livelihoods of 3,000 families. People who had worked for me for decades. People who had sent him birthday cards when he was a child. He was trading their futures for a quick payout to cover his gambling debts. But what if he finds out? Monica asked. She sounded worried, but not about the morality of it. She was worried about getting caught. He won't find out until it is too late, Bradley said, pouring himself another glass of wine. That bottle alone cost more than my first car. And even if he does, what is he going to do? Sue me? I have his medical power of attorney. I will just have him declared incompetent. I will put him in that home on the coast, the one with the high walls. He will be too medicated to know what day it is. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was my son, the boy I had taught to fish. The boy I had sat up with when he had fevers. He was planning to lobotomize me legally so he could steal my legacy. But then, Monica said something that stopped my heart. I don't know, Brad. He is tough. He lingers. It would be so much easier if nature just took its course. Bradley laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. You are telling me. Honestly, it would be better if the old man kicked the bucket soon. It would save us a lot of legal fees. Plus, we wouldn't have to pretend to like his boring war stories anymore. The life insurance policy pays out double if he dies of natural causes before 71. Just saying. There it was. The sentence that severed the last thread of DNA connecting us. He did not just view me as a bank account. He viewed my life as an obstacle to his efficiency. He was calculating the ROI on my death. I lowered the binoculars. I set them down on the table with a deliberate, soft click. I did not feel sad. I did not feel the grief I expected to feel. Instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The fog of fatherhood, the haze of unconditional love that had blinded me to his true nature for 40 years, had finally lifted. I saw him clearly now. He was not a wayward child. He was a predator. And he had made the fatal mistake of forgetting that he learned how to hunt from me. I picked up my phone. The screen illuminated the dark room, casting a ghostly blue light on my face. I opened the banking app. The Protocol 0 button that Catherine had set up was glowing red on the screen. It was a digital kill switch. One press, and every asset, every credit card, every bank account linked to my name would be frozen instantly. The trust funds would lock. The access cards would deactivate. The cars would be reported stolen. I looked across the lawn one last time. Bradley was raising his glass to the moon, celebrating a victory he had not yet won. "Enjoy the wine, son," I whispered into the darkness. "It is the last thing you will ever taste that you didn't earn." I did not press the button yet. That would be too merciful. Panic in the middle of the night was too private. I wanted him to feel the shame publicly. I wanted the humiliation to be as loud as his arrogance. I wanted him to stand in front of the people he was trying to impress and realize he was naked. I called Henderson. "General Manager speaking." "Henderson," I said. My voice was steady, calm, and terrifyingly polite. "I have a change of plans. Do not cancel the room yet. Let them sleep in the royal suite tonight. Let them order breakfast in bed. But tomorrow night, Bradley is hosting a dinner for his investors at your flagship restaurant, correct?" "Yes, sir. He has reserved the private oceanfront table." "Good. Let him eat. Let him order the most expensive items on the menu. Let him open the vintage wines. And when the bill comes, that is when you decline the card. There was a pause on the line. Henderson understood theater. Understood, Mr. Caldwell. And if he tries to use a different card? Block them all, I said. Every single one. I want him to realize that without me, he does not even have the currency to buy a breath of air in this resort. And Henderson? Yes, sir. Make sure the restaurant is full. I hung up. I leaned back in the chair, watching the silhouette of my son stumbling back into the suite, his arm draped around his wife. They were going to sleep in Egyptian cotton sheets tonight, dreaming of millions. They had no idea that the man they left at the airport was sitting 300 yards away, holding the match that would burn their fantasy to ash. The ghost had arrived in paradise, and he was ready to haunt them. The restaurant at the resort was the kind of place where the menu did not list prices. It was an open-air pavilion perched on the edge of the black volcanic cliffs, with torches flickering against the night sky and the sound of waves crashing below providing a natural symphony for the ultra-wealthy. From my vantage point in the darkened villa across the garden, I could see table 12 clearly. It was the best table in the house, the one that required a reservation 6 months in advance. Bradley had secured it by dropping my name and promising a tip that he currently did not have the funds to cover. I adjusted the focus on my binoculars. My son looked like a king holding court. He was seated at the head of the table, his face flushed with the kind of confidence that only comes from ignorance. To his right sat Monica, glittering in a sequined dress that cost more than my first car. Around them sat the 3 men from Apex Capital. I had done my research on them. Sterling, the man in the sharkskin suit, was not an investor. He was a con artist who had spent 2 years in federal prison for wire fraud. But Bradley did not see a predator. He saw a mirror of who he wanted to be. I watched as the sommelier approached the table with a bottle of Chateau Margaux. I knew that bottle. It was a 2015 vintage, priced at $5,000 on the resort wine list. Bradley waved his hand dismissively, gesturing for the man to pour. He did not even taste it first. He just wanted the label facing outward so the other diners could see it. He wanted the theater of wealth, without understanding the substance of value. Through the high-fidelity microphone I had planted in the floral centerpiece earlier that afternoon, a trick I learned during corporate espionage days in the 80s, their voices drifted into my room, crisp and clear. "To the future!" Bradley bellowed, raising his glass. "To Caldwell Logistics entering the crypto age!" "To the future," Sterling echoed, his smile not reaching his eyes. He took a sip of the expensive wine and leaned in. "So, Bradley, about the liquidity. If we sign the transfer papers tomorrow morning, my partners are ready to wire the $5 million directly to your offshore account by noon. No taxes, no waiting." Bradley laughed, a loud, wet sound that grated on my nerves. "Done deal, Sterling. The old man is out of the picture. I have the power of attorney. I am the captain now." I sat in the dark, my hand resting on the phone. "Not yet," I whispered. "Eat first." I watched them devour the meal. They ordered the Wagyu beef tomahawks, the lobster thermidor, the caviar service. They ate with the ravenous hunger of people who believe the feast will never end. Bradley was in his element, snapping his fingers at the waitstaff, complaining that the water wasn't cold enough, sending back a perfectly cooked steak because he wanted it more rare. He was drunk on power, drunk on wine, and drunk on the illusion of independence. Then, The moment arrived. The meal was cleared. The table was crumbed. The waiter, a young man named David, whom I had spoken to briefly before dinner, approached with a leather folder. "The bill, sir," David said softly, placing it beside Bradley's elbow. Bradley didn't even look at it. He didn't check the itemized list. He didn't calculate the tip. With a flourish that was almost theatrical, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the black onyx card. It was heavy, made of metal, the kind of card that makes a satisfying clatter when it hits the table. "Put it all on this," Bradley said, not even making eye contact. "And add 20% for yourself. Keep the change." David picked up the card with two hands, bowed slightly, and walked away toward the point-of-sale terminal station near the entrance. I leaned forward in my chair. This was it. The distance between the table and the terminal was only 30 feet, but for Bradley, it was the distance between his fantasy life and his cold reality. I watched David slide the card into the machine. I watched him wait. I saw the frown crease his forehead. He pulled the card out, wiped the chip on his apron, and inserted it again. The red light on the machine flashed. David picked up the phone next to the register. I knew exactly who he was calling. He was calling the Merchant Services Hotline, a number that currently redirected to a specific security protocol I had initiated. I could see the conversation happening. David nodded. He looked at the card. He looked back at table 12. His expression shifted from service industry politeness to the stern professionalism of a man dealing with a criminal. He hung up the phone and walked back to the table. He did not rush. He walked with purpose. At the table, Bradley was busy laughing at one of Sterling's jokes. He didn't notice David standing there until the waiter cleared his throat. "Sir?" David said. Bradley looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "What? Do you need a signature?" "No, sir," David said, his voice loud enough that the neighboring tables went quiet. "I need another form of payment. This card has been declined." The silence that fell over table 12 was absolute. The laughter died in Sterling's throat. Monica froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Declined?" Bradley sputtered, his face turning a shade of crimson that matched the lobster shells. "That is impossible. That is a black onyx card. It has no limit. Run it again." "I have run it 3 times, sir," David said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "The code returned is not insufficient funds. The code is stolen. The issuer has flagged this card as misappropriated property." "Stolen?" Bradley stood up, his chair scraping violently against the stone floor. "Do you know who I am? I am Bradley Caldwell. That is my father's card. I have authorization." "The issuer disagrees," David replied, unmoved. "Do you have another card?" Bradley's hands were shaking now. I could see it through the binoculars. He patted his pockets frantically, pulling out his personal wallet. He slapped a gold Visa on the table. "Try this one." David took it. He walked back to the machine. Same result. Declined. Card frozen by account holder. He walked back. "Declined, sir." Bradley threw an Amex on the table. "Try this." Declined. A debit MasterCard. Declined. By the 4th card, the sweat was visible on Bradley's forehead. It was beading at his hairline, trickling down his temple. He looked around the restaurant, his eyes wide and wild. The other diners were staring. The whispers had started. I could see the guests at the next table pointing, hiding their giggles behind their napkins. Sterling cleared his throat. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Well, Bradley, this has been interesting." Wait! Bradley grabbed Sterling's arm. Sit down. It is just a glitch. The bank systems must be down. I will call my father. He will sort this out in 2 seconds. Sterling peeled Bradley's fingers off his sleeve as if he were touching something contagious. I don't think so, kid. We do business with professionals. People who can pay for dinner. Call us when you grow up. Sterling and his 2 associates walked away without looking back. They didn't offer to split the bill. They were vultures, and vultures do not feed each other. They only feed on the carcass. Now it was just Bradley and Monica. Monica turned on him, her face twisted in a snarl. You embarrassed me, she hissed, slamming her napkin onto the table. You said you had everything under control. You said the money was transferred. I did. Bradley was hyperventilating now. He pulled out his phone, his thumbs fumbling over the screen. I am calling Dad. He must have done something. He must be confused. I watched my own phone buzz on the table next to me. The screen lit up with Bradley's face. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. At the restaurant, Bradley was screaming into his voicemail. Dad, pick up! The cards aren't working. They think I stole them. Pick up! David, the waiter, signaled to the manager. 2 large security guards emerged from the shadows of the tiki torches. They stepped up to the table, crossing their arms. Sir, the manager said, stepping into the light. The bill is $18,420. We need payment immediately. I can't, Bradley stammered. He looked small. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in the supermarket. I don't have cash on me. Can you bill it to the room? Your room privileges have been revoked, the manager said. The primary account holder has removed you from the folio. You are no longer a guest of the resort effective tomorrow morning. You are currently trespassing. Monica let out a shriek that sounded like a wounded animal. She grabbed her clutch purse and tried to stand up. I am leaving. I am not a part of this. Sit down, ma'am, the security guard said, blocking her path. No one leaves until the bill is settled. But we don't have the money, Monica wailed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Then we will need collateral, the manager said. He looked at Bradley's wrist. That is a Rolex Daytona, isn't it? And that diamond ring, ma'am. Bradley clutched his wrist. No, not the watch. It was a fake. I knew it was a fake. He had bought it in Chinatown for $200 and told everyone it was a vintage Paul Newman worth 6 figures. If he handed it over, the hotel would appraise it and know he was a fraud. If he didn't hand it over, he went to jail. The police are on their way, the manager said, checking his own watch. Theft of services over $10,000 is a felony in Hawaii. You will be held in the county lockup until your arraignment on Monday. Bradley looked at Monica. Monica looked at the ring on her finger. It was the engagement ring I had paid for. 3 carats. Flawless. Give it to him, Bradley whispered. What? Monica screamed. Are you insane? Give it to him, Bradley roared, slamming his fist on the table, making the glasses jump. Or we go to jail, Monica. Do you want to sleep in a cell tonight? Sobbing, Monica wrenched the ring off her finger and threw it onto the table. It spun on the wood, sparkling in the torchlight. Bradley slowly unclasped the fake watch. He placed it next to the ring. His hand was trembling so violently that he couldn't put it down flat. It rattled against the wood. The manager picked up the items. He examined the watch, his eyebrow arching slightly as he felt the weight of it. He knew. But he didn't say anything. He just nodded. This will serve as a deposit. You have 24 hours to return with payment in full, or these items will be forfeited and charges will be pressed. Now get out of my restaurant." Bradley and Monica stood up. The walk of shame was long. They had to weave through the tables of staring, silent diners. Bradley kept his head down, staring at his shoes. Monica covered her face with her clutch. They didn't look like the power couple from Instagram anymore. They looked like refugees from a disaster of their own making. I lowered the binoculars. I picked up my glass of water and took a slow, satisfying sip. The dinner was over. The check had been presented. And for the first time in his life, my son had paid the price. But the night was not over. The humiliation was just the appetizer. Tomorrow, I would serve the main course. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Catherine. Phase 1 complete. Execute the eviction at dawn. I watched them disappear into the shadows of the garden, arguing, their voices shrill and panicked. I felt a twinge of sorrow, a ghost of the love I once had for the little boy who used to hold my hand. But then I remembered the airport. I remembered the words, "Just go home." I am home, son, I thought. And I am cleaning house. The vibration of the phone against the glass table was a harsh, mechanical sound that cut through the silence of my darkened villa. It was midnight in Los Angeles, which meant that to my son, I should have been fast asleep in my lonely mansion, dreaming of the past. But here in Hawaii, it was barely 9 o'clock in the evening. The air was still warm, carrying the scent of salt and blooming jasmine, but inside my chest, everything was cold. I stared at the screen. The name Bradley flashed relentlessly, lighting up the room with a ghostly blue glow. He was calling. Of course he was calling. The rat had found itself in the maze with no cheese, and now it was squealing for the hand that used to feed it. I did not answer immediately. I picked up my binoculars instead. Across the manicured lawn, through the sliding glass doors of the hotel lobby, I could see him. Bradley was pacing back and forth near the concierge desk, his hand clamped to his ear, his other hand chopping the air violently. Monica was sitting on a nearby bench, her face buried in her hands, looking like a statue of despair. She was no longer the queen of the resort. She was just a woman without a credit limit. I let the phone ring. 5 times, 6 times, 7. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to feel the creeping dread of being truly, utterly alone. I wanted him to wonder, just for a moment, if I had died in my sleep, leaving him stranded in paradise with a bill he could not pay. Finally, on the 10th ring, I picked up. I cleared my throat, roughening my voice, summoning the persona of the frail, confused old man they believed me to be. "Hello?" I mumbled, slurring my words slightly. "Who is this?" "Dad. Dad, thank God." Bradley's voice exploded in my ear, shrill and breathless. "Why didn't you pick up? I have been calling for 10 minutes. I rubbed my eyes, though I was wide awake. Bradley. I sighed, feigning the disorientation of the elderly. "It is midnight. Why are you calling? Is everyone okay? Are the grandchildren safe?" Yes, the kids are fine," he snapped, dismissing my concern for his children as if it were a nuisance. "Dad, we have a major problem, a massive emergency. The credit cards aren't working. None of them." I leaned back in my leather chair, taking a sip of the ice water I had placed on the coaster. I kept my gaze fixed on his tiny figure across the garden. He was shouting into the phone now, ignoring the disapproving looks from the hotel staff. "What do you mean, not working?" I asked, keeping my voice slow and steady. "I mean they are declined, Dad. Declined. I tried to pay for dinner, and the waiter told me the account was flagged for fraud." He said the cards were reported stolen. It was humiliating. They almost called the police. You have to call the bank right now. You have to fix this. I let a long silence hang between us. I watched him stop pacing. He was waiting for me to jump into action, to be the fixer, the safety net I had always been. "Oh, that," I said finally, my tone shifting from sleepy to casually conversational. "Yes, I saw the alerts on my phone earlier this evening. It was quite alarming." "Alarming? What are you talking about? Fix it." "Well, son, the bank sent me a notification. It said someone was trying to charge $18,000 at a restaurant in Maui. $18,000 for one dinner. Can you imagine?" There was a pause on the other end. I could hear his breathing, heavy and panicked. "Dad, that was me. That was our dinner." I let out a dry, disbelief-filled chuckle. "You?" "No, Bradley, that does not make sense. You told me this trip was already paid for. You told me you were handling everything. And besides, my son is a smart man. He knows the value of $1. He would never spend $18,000 on a single meal while his father is sitting at home eating leftover soup. That would be cruel, wouldn't it?" I saw him flinch. Even from 300 yards away, I saw his shoulders stiffen. "Dad, listen to me," he hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It was a business dinner. I was entertaining investors. For the company. I need you to unlock the cards. Now. They are holding my watch as collateral." "Your watch?" I asked innocently. "The one you told me cost $50,000? Well, that should cover the bill nicely then. Why do you need the cards?" Because I need the cash flow, Dad. Stop asking questions and just call the bank. Tell them it was me. Tell them to lift the hold." "I cannot do that, Bradley." "What do you mean you can't?" "I reported the cards stolen," I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. "When I saw that charge, I assumed my wallet had been compromised. I assumed someone had hacked our accounts. So, I did the responsible thing. I called the fraud department, and I had them cancel everything. The black card, the Visa, the corporate accounts. All of them are dead, Bradley. Gone." "No," he moaned, a sound of pure agony. "No, you didn't. Tell me you didn't cancel the corporate accounts." "I had to, son. Safety first. You know how dangerous identity theft is these days." He was screaming now. "You idiot! You senile old idiot! Do you know what you have done? I have a meeting tomorrow morning. I need to pay for the conference room. I need to pay for the yacht. I have $5 million on the line." $5 million, I repeated. That sounds like a lot of money for a man who forgot to buy his father a plane ticket. He stopped. The insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Dad," he pleaded, switching tactics. He tried to sound soft, manipulative. "Dad, I am sorry about the ticket. Honestly, it was a mistake. We miss you here." "We were just talking about you. But please, I am begging you. I am stranded here with Monica and the kids. We have no money. We can't even buy breakfast tomorrow. You can't do this to us." I watched Monica walk over to him. She grabbed his arm, whispering frantically. She looked terrified. Good. She should be. "Bradley," I said, my voice dropping the facade of the confused old man. I sounded like the CEO I used to be. Sharp, cold, final. "Do you remember what you told me at the airport?" "What?" "Dad, this isn't the time for—" "You told me I was too old. You told me the travel would be too much for me. You told me to go home and rest. Dad, please. So I am resting, Bradley. I am resting very comfortably. And dealing with the bank, arguing with fraud departments, reactivating accounts. That sounds like a lot of work. That sounds like stress. And you know how my blood pressure gets. Dad, stop it. Unlock the cards. I can't, I lied smoothly. The bank said I have to come into the branch personally to verify my identity. With 2 forms of ID, and since it is the weekend, they are closed until Monday. And even then, I don't know if I feel up to the drive. My back is hurting, just like you said it would. Monday. Bradley screamed the word. I can't wait until Monday. The deal is tomorrow. Then I guess you better find another way to pay, I said. You are a self-made man, aren't you? That is what you put on your Instagram. #self-made. Surely a self-made man doesn't need his daddy's credit card to buy eggs for breakfast. Dad, wait. Good night, Bradley. Enjoy paradise. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could still hear his voice, tiny and tinny, screaming my name. I pressed the red button and ended the call. I did not put the phone down immediately. I raised the binoculars again. I watched Bradley stare at his own phone in disbelief. He shook it, as if trying to shake the money out of it. Then, in a fit of rage, he wound up and threw the device. It sailed through the air and smashed against the marble floor of the lobby, shattering into pieces. Monica screamed at him. He screamed back. It was a beautiful scene, a masterpiece of chaos. I set my binoculars down and picked up my glass of water. It was cool and refreshing. My blood pressure felt perfectly fine. In fact, I had not felt this relaxed in years. I had taken away his safety net, and now, for the first time in his life, my son was falling. I would be there to catch him, eventually. But not before he hit the ground. Not before he broke. I stood up and walked to the window, closing the curtains, shutting out the view of their misery. I needed to get some sleep. I had a big meeting in the morning, and I wanted to look my best when I walked into that conference room and destroyed what was left of his world. The morning sun in Maui is usually a gentle wake-up call, a soft gold light that filters through the palm fronds and promises another day of leisure. But for my son and his wife, the morning brought a very different kind of heat. From my position on the shaded terrace of Villa 4, sipping a cup of Kona coffee that tasted like justice, I watched the inevitable collapse of their fragile little empire. It started at 8 in the morning. I knew their routine. Monica liked to have breakfast on the private balcony of the royal suite, ordering the acai bowls and the mimosa flight, while Bradley pretended to check stocks on his iPad. But today, there would be no room service. I had instructed the kitchen to blacklist their room number at midnight. I watched through the binoculars as Bradley stepped out onto the balcony, phone in hand, looking confused. He was likely trying to call the concierge to scream about his missing Eggs Benedict. I saw him tap the screen furiously, then shake the device. The room phone line had been cut. The Wi-Fi password had been changed. They were digitally stranded. A moment later, the heavy wooden door of the royal suite opened. Bradley and Monica emerged, dressed in their resort finest. Monica wore a flowing silk caftan and oversized sunglasses, and Bradley was in his linen shorts. They were heading to the club lounge, assuming they could just bypass the blocked room service and raid the buffet. They marched down the hallway with their noses in the air, completely unaware that their status had expired 7 hours ago. I shifted my gaze to the lobby entrance of the VIP wing. Henderson was waiting there. He stood like a sentinel, his hands clasped behind his back, flanked by two of his largest security officers. When Bradley and Monica reached the glass doors that separated the high-roller suites from the commoners, they stopped. Bradley swiped his keycard. The light on the reader blinked red. He swiped it again. Red. He swiped it a third time, harder, as if physical force could compel the electronic lock to respect him. I saw him kick the door. It was a petulant, childish kick. That was the cue. Henderson stepped forward. I could not hear them through the glass, but I had bugged the hallway planter, so the audio fed directly into my earpiece. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," Henderson said, his voice smooth and dangerously polite. "Open this door," Bradley snapped, not even looking at him. "Your system is garbage. My key isn't working, the room service line is dead, and I have a meeting in 2 hours. Fix it." "I am afraid I cannot do that, sir," Henderson replied. "The electronic keys are programmed to deactivate when a reservation is terminated." "Terminated?" Monica stepped forward, lowering her sunglasses. "What are you talking about? We are booked for a week. My father-in-law paid for it." "Correct," Henderson said. "Mr. George Caldwell paid for it. And late last night, Mr. George Caldwell exercised his right as the primary cardholder to modify the reservation. He felt that the royal suite was perhaps too excessive for your current needs." "Modify?" Bradley laughed, a nervous cracking sound. "Okay, fine. The old man is having a tantrum. Whatever. Just let us into the lounge so we can eat, and I will call him and sort this out." "Access to the club lounge is reserved for our suite guests," Henderson said, blocking their path physically. "And since you are no longer suite guests, I must ask you to return to your room to pack. You have 30 minutes to vacate the royal suite." "Vacate?" Bradley's face turned a mottled purple. "You can't kick us out. We have rights." "You are not being kicked out of the resort, Mr. Caldwell," Henderson clarified, consulting a clipboard. "Your father was gracious enough to not leave you homeless. He has transferred your booking to a different category. He moved you to room 104. "Room 104? Monica scoffed. "Is that an ocean view suite? I don't recall seeing that on the map." "It is a standard garden room," Henderson said, "located on the lower level of the service wing." "The service wing?" Monica shrieked. Her voice echoed off the marble walls. "You want us to stay in the basement? With the maids and the laundry staff?" "It is a perfectly adequate room, ma'am," Henderson said. "Now please, we have a housekeeping team waiting to sanitize the royal suite for the next guest. You need to move your belongings immediately." "I am not moving a muscle," Monica shouted. "I am calling my lawyer. I am calling the police. This is harassment." "You are welcome to call whomever you like," Henderson said, signaling the security guards to step closer. "But if you do not vacate the suite in 30 minutes, we will be forced to remove your belongings for you. And given the amount of luggage you brought, I imagine you would prefer to pack it yourselves to avoid any accidental damage." Bradley looked at the guards. He looked at Henderson. He realized he had no leverage. He had no money to bribe them. He had no status to threaten them. He turned to Monica. "Let's just go pack," he muttered. "I will fix this. I will get the money from Sterling, and we will move to the Ritz-Carlton tonight. This place is a dump anyway." I watched them turn around and trudge back to the room they had ruled like monarchs just yesterday. The walk back was heavy, defeated. But the real show was just beginning. 45 minutes later, the door to the royal suite opened again. This time, there were no porters, no bellhops rushing to assist. I had instructed Henderson that porter service was an add-on fee, one that their current room category did not include. Bradley emerged first, dragging two of the massive Louis Vuitton trunks. He was sweating profusely. The air conditioning in the hallway was cool, but the panic radiating off him was hot. He struggled with the weight, the wheels catching on the carpet. Monica followed, carrying only her handbag and a look of pure venom. "Why aren't you helping me?" Bradley grunted, heaving the bags toward the elevator. "I am wearing heels, Bradley," she spat back. "And this is your fault. You said you had control of the old man. You said he was senile. He doesn't seem very senile to me. He seems to be ruining my life on purpose." "Shut up, Monica. Just press the elevator button." They reached the elevator bank. But instead of the glass-walled elevator that offered panoramic views of the ocean, Henderson guided them toward the service elevator. It was a large, scuffed metal box used for laundry carts and room service trays. It smelled of bleach and old coffee. "This is an insult," Monica muttered, covering her nose as the doors closed on them. I switched my camera feed to the security camera in the lower hallway. Room 104 was indeed in the service wing. It was a part of the hotel that never made it onto the brochures. It was located directly above the industrial laundry facility and next to the loading dock where the garbage trucks reversed every morning at 5. The hallway was narrow, lit by flickering fluorescent strips. The carpet was a dated, brown geometric pattern that hid stains well. I watched the elevator doors open. Bradley shoved the trunks out, panting for breath. His linen shirt was soaked through at the back. "Room 104, he read the plaque on the wall. It was hanging slightly crooked. He swiped the new keycard Henderson had given him. The light turned green. He pushed the door open. I did not have a camera inside the room, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly what room 104 was like. It was the room we used for emergency overflow, or for guests who booked on third-party discount sites and then complained about everything. It was 300 square feet. The window did not face the ocean. It faced a concrete retaining wall and the dumpster enclosure. The air conditioning unit was an old wall-mounted model that rattled like a dying engine and barely cooled the air. I could hear their reaction through the thin walls via the hallway bug. "Oh my God," Monica screamed. "It smells like mildew. And look at the bed. It is a queen. We sleep in a king, Bradley, a king." "It is just for a few hours, Monica," Bradley yelled back. "Stop screaming. It is hot in here. Where is the AC remote?" "There is no remote. It is a knob on the wall. And look at the window. That is a trash can, Bradley, a trash can. I can see flies." I leaned back in my chair, visualizing the scene. The claustrophobia setting in, the heat building up, the smell of the humid tropics mixing with the scent of the nearby dumpster. It was a sensory prison. I walked over to the desk in my villa and picked up the landline phone. I dialed the front desk. "Connect me to room 104, I said. The phone rang in their room. I heard Bradley fumble for it. "Hello? Who is this? Help us!" "Hey, son," I said, my voice cheerful. "Just checking in. How is the new room?" "Dad, you sick, twisted," Bradley sputtered. "Get us out of here. There are ants on the windowsill. The AC is broken." "Oh, I am sorry to hear that," I said. "But you know, budgets are tight. I had to downgrade you to the economy package. It is the same package I used to stay in when I was a truck driver, remember? You always said you wanted to understand how I built the company. Well, it started in rooms like that." "Dad, stop trying to teach me a lesson and send the black card. I have the meeting with Sterling in an hour. I can't meet him smelling like sweat." "You have a shower, don't you?" I asked. Although I believe the water pressure in that wing is a bit temperamental. You are enjoying this, aren't you? Monica screamed from the background. You bitter old man! You are jealous because we are young and we have a future. I have a future too, Monica, I replied calmly. My future involves a very nice lunch on the terrace while you two figure out how to pay for your own dinner tonight. Because remember, the room is paid for, but the food isn't. And I canceled the breakfast buffet access too. You what? Bradley sounded faint. I hope you packed some granola bars, I said. Oh, and Bradley, one more thing. I wouldn't count on that meeting with Sterling. Why? What did you do? I didn't do anything, I said. But I imagine it is hard to close a $5 million deal when you are staying in a room next to the garbage chute. It doesn't exactly scream corporate solvency, does it? I hung up before he could answer. I went back to the balcony. I could see the small, dirty window of room 104 from where I stood. It was just a tiny square of darkness in the bright white wall of the resort. I saw the curtains twitch. Monica was probably looking out, trying to see the ocean she had been banished from. But the humiliation was not contained to the room. The real breaking point came 10 minutes later. Hunger is a powerful motivator, and arrogance is a stubborn habit. Bradley and Monica stormed out of room 104, leaving the luggage scattered on the floor. They marched back to the main lobby, determined to create a scene that would force the management to yield. I tracked them on the cameras. They walked up to the concierge desk, cutting in front of a polite elderly couple who were booking a tour. I want to speak to the owner, Monica demanded, slamming her hand on the marble counter. Not the manager, the owner. Ma'am, please lower your voice, the concierge said, stepping back. Don't tell me what to do. Do you know how much money we spend here? Monica screamed. Her hair was starting to frizz in the humidity, her makeup smudging. She looked unhinged. This is illegal. You are holding us hostage in a dungeon, Bradley chimed in, trying to puff out his chest. My father is George Caldwell. He will sue this entire hotel into the ground. Call him right now. Sir, we have spoken to your father, the concierge said calmly. He was very specific. He said that if you caused the disturbance, we were to treat you like any other unruly guest. And how is that? Bradley sneered. Security, the concierge called out. The response was immediate. 3 uniformed guards surrounded them. This was not the VIP security detail. This was the enforcement team. They were big, serious men who did not care about Bradley's linen shirt or Monica's last name. Sir, ma'am, you are disturbing the peace, the lead guard said. You have 2 choices. You can return to your room and stay quiet, or you can be escorted off the property. If you are escorted off, you will be trespassing if you return, and we will call the Maui Police Department. Off the property? Bradley looked around. The lobby was filled with guests. People were holding up their phones, recording. The live streamer had become the content. He saw the lenses pointed at him. He saw the sneers. He saw his reputation dissolving in real time. Fine, Bradley whispered, holding up his hands in surrender. We are going back to the room. Coward! Monica hissed at him, loud enough for everyone to hear. Do something! Punch him! I am not going to punch a security guard, Monica, Bradley snapped, his voice cracking. Just shut up and walk. They turned around, flanked by the guards, and began the long walk back to the service elevator. The guests parted like the Red Sea, not out of respect, but out of second-hand embarrassment. I saw the shame burn on Bradley's face. It was a deep red flush that went all the way to his ears. He kept his head down, staring at the expensive carpet that he was no longer worthy to walk on. As they disappeared into the service corridor, I took a deep breath of the ocean air. It tasted sweet. The luxury they worshipped had rejected them. The facade was gone. Now they were just two angry, hungry people in a hot room, realizing that without me, they were nothing. I checked my watch. The meeting with Sterling was scheduled for noon. It was time for me to get dressed. I chose a white linen suit, one that whispered old money and absolute authority. I wanted to look like the angel of death when I walked into that conference room. The basement was just the holding cell. The execution chamber was waiting upstairs. The conference room Bradley had managed to secure was not the oceanfront boardroom with the mahogany table and the panoramic view of the Pacific. That room required a deposit he could no longer afford. Instead, they were huddled in a small, windowless meeting space on the ground floor, usually reserved for staff training or deposition prep. The air was stale, recycled, and thick with the scent of desperation. I watched them through the pinhole camera embedded in the smoke detector, a feed that was broadcasting directly to my tablet in the villa. My son sat on one side of a folding plastic table. His linen shirt, once crisp and white, was now wrinkled and stained with sweat beneath the armpits. He looked like a man who had been running a marathon in a sauna. Beside him, Monica was pacing the length of the small room, her heels clicking nervously against the linoleum floor. She was biting her nails, a habit she had sworn she broke years ago. Opposite them sat Sterling. The vulture capitalist looked perfectly at ease. He had not even loosened his tie. He sat with the stillness of a predator that knows the prey is already caught in the trap. On the table between them lay a single manila envelope and a heavy fountain pen. "So," Sterling said, breaking the silence. His voice was smooth, devoid of sympathy. "Let us review the situation. You currently owe the resort $18,000 for a dinner you could not pay for. You owe my associates $9,000 because we were gracious enough to cover our half of the bill to avoid being arrested alongside you. And, according to my sources, your credit cards are dead, your hotel room is a closet next to a dumpster, and you have no way off this island." Bradley swallowed hard. The sound was audible even through the microphone. "Look, Sterling, it is just a temporary liquidity issue. My father, he is having a medical episode. He froze the accounts by mistake. I just need a bridge loan. Just $50,000. I will pay you back double next week." Sterling laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "A bridge loan? Bradley, you are not a distressed asset. You are a liability. I do not lend money to people who get kicked out of the breakfast buffet. I buy things. And right now, the only thing you have of any value is that power of attorney." Sterling reached into the envelope and slid a thick document across the table. "This is the purchase agreement for Caldwell Logistics," Sterling said. $5 million, cash, wired to your offshore account in the Cayman Islands within the hour." Bradley looked at the document. His hands were trembling so badly he had to clasp them together on the table to steady them. "$5 million?" Bradley whispered, his voice cracking. "Sterling, are you crazy? The fleet alone is worth $40 million. The real estate in Long Beach is worth another 10. The brand equity. This company is worth $50 million minimum. You are asking me to sell it for 10 cents on the dollar." "I am asking you to sell it for the price of your freedom," Sterling replied coldly. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Bradley's. "You are looking at this like a businessman, Bradley. Stop. You are not a businessman. You are a fugitive in waiting. If you do not pay that hotel bill by this evening, you go to jail. If you go to jail, the news gets out. If the news gets out, the company's stock tanks anyway. I am offering you a lifeboat. It is a small lifeboat, yes, but it is better than drowning. Bradley looked at the paper. I could see the war waging behind his eyes. He knew the value of what I had built. He knew that selling it for $5 million was not just a bad deal. It was an insult. It was spitting on my grave before I was even in it. "I can't do it," Bradley muttered, pushing the paper away. "My dad, if he ever wakes up, if he finds out I sold a $50 million empire for $5 million, he will kill me. He will literally kill me." "He is not going to kill you," Monica hissed. She stopped pacing and slammed her hands down on the table, leaning into Bradley's face. Her eyes were wide, manic. She looked like a cornered animal. "He is going to disown you anyway, Bradley. Do you think he is going to forgive you for the airport? For the credit cards? We are already dead to him." "The only difference is, if you sign that paper, we are dead with $5 million in the bank. If you don't, we are dead and in prison." "Monica, it is my dad's legacy," Bradley pleaded, looking at her for support that wasn't there. "He spent 40 years building those shipping lanes." "Who cares?" Monica screamed. "Who cares about his stupid ships? I care about me. I care about us. Do you want to rot in a Hawaiian jail cell? Do you want to be scrubbing toilets for the rest of your life? Sign the paper, Bradley." She grabbed the pen and shoved it into his hand. "We can go to Europe," she whispered, her voice dropping to a frantic, seductive hiss. "We can take the money and disappear. We can go to Monaco or Switzerland. We can start over. $5 million is enough for us. We don't need him. We don't need his approval. Just sign it, and we are free." Bradley looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. I had given him a similar one for his graduation. He had lost it within a week. He looked at Sterling. "If I sign this," Bradley asked, his voice shaking, "the money is wired today?" "Before the ink is dry," Sterling promised. "And you will pay the hotel bill?" "Consider it a signing bonus." Bradley closed his eyes. I watched him take a deep breath. I waited for him to throw the pen across the room. I waited for him to stand up and say that no amount of money was worth betraying his father, worth destroying the livelihood of 3,000 employees. I waited for the spark of integrity that I had tried so hard to ignite in him. But there was no spark. There was only ash. He opened his eyes. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked defeated. He looked weak. "Where do I sign?" he asked. "Page 20, Sterling said, flipping the document open. "And remember, you are signing as George Caldwell, per the power of attorney proxy." I zoomed in with the camera. I wanted to see this. I needed to see this. Bradley placed the tip of the pen on the signature line. His hand was shaking so violently that the first attempt was just a jagged scratch. "Steady," Monica whispered, rubbing his back. "Just pretend you were him. Just pretend you were the boss." He took a breath. He steadied his hand. And then he began to write. He didn't write Bradley Caldwell. He wrote George Caldwell. He forged my signature. It was a good forgery. He had spent years practicing it, probably on report cards and detention slips when he was a child. Now, he was using that skill to sign away my life's work. I watched the ink flow onto the paper, the loops of the G, the sharp slant of the C. Every stroke was a knife in my back. When he finished, he slumped back in his chair, dropping the pen as if it were burning hot. "It is done," Bradley whispered. Monica let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She grabbed the document and kissed the signature. "We did it. We are rich. We are safe." Sterling picked up the document. He blew on the ink to dry it. He smiled, a shark baring its teeth. "Pleasure doing business with you, Bradley. You have made a very wise decision. For yourself, at least." I sat in my villa, staring at the screen. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It was not the pounding of panic. It was the pounding of a judge's gavel. They thought they had just bought their freedom. They thought they had just secured a future of leisure in Europe. They had no idea that they had just signed a confession. The document Bradley had just signed was not just a sale agreement. It was irrefutable proof of fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse. By signing my name to sell an asset he knew was undervalued, based on a power of attorney he obtained under false pretenses, he had committed a felony that carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in federal prison. He hadn't sold his soul for $5 million. He had sold it for a one-way ticket to a cell block. I picked up my phone. Catherine was on speed dial. "He signed it," I said. My voice was flat, dead. "I saw it," Catherine replied. She was monitoring the feed as well. "The notary is waiting outside the conference room door. The police are with him." "Give them 2 minutes," I said. "Let them celebrate. Let them feel the rush of the money. Let them think they got away with it. I want the fall to be absolute." I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I adjusted my white linen suit. I straightened my tie. I looked at the man in the reflection. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. "It is time," I said to myself. I walked out of the villa and crossed the manicured lawn toward the conference room. The sun was high overhead, beating down on the resort, bleaching the colors, making everything look sharp and exposed. There were no shadows left to hide in. Inside the room, I could see Monica hugging Bradley. They were laughing now, hysterical, relief washing over them. Sterling was putting the document into his briefcase. They were celebrating the death of my legacy. I reached the door of the conference room. I did not knock. I did not hesitate. I placed my hand on the handle. The show is over, I thought. I pushed the door open. The sound of a fountain pen scratching against paper is usually a sound of commerce, of progress, of agreements made between gentlemen. But in that small, airless conference room, the sound of the nib tearing into the fiber of the document sounded like a knife slicing through skin. I stood outside the door, my hand hovering over the cold metal handle, listening to the final stroke of the letter L in Caldwell. Bradley had finished. He had done it. He had committed a felony in broad daylight, surrounded by witnesses, fueled by greed and the terrified urging of a woman who loved money more than she loved him. I looked at Catherine Ross standing beside me. Her face was a mask of professional stone, but I saw the tightening of her jaw. She held the tablet that was still streaming the video feed from inside. She nodded once. That was the signal. The crime was complete. The intent was executed. There was no going back for him now. Behind us, 2 officers from the Maui Police Department adjusted their belts, their handcuffs rattling softly. It was a grim sound, a sound that signaled the end of freedom. I took a deep breath. I did not feel anger anymore. Anger is a hot emotion, a fire that burns you up inside. I felt cold. I felt the icy clarity of a surgeon about to cut out a gangrenous limb to save the body. I smoothed the lapel of my white linen suit. I adjusted my cuffs. I was not the confused old man left at the airport. I was the chairman. and the chairman was calling the meeting to order. I pushed the handle down and threw the door open. It swung wide, hitting the wall stopper with a loud wooden thud that echoed like a gunshot in the confined space. The reaction inside was instant. Sterling, the vulture, flinched, his hand instinctively covering the document. Monica let out a short, sharp scream, jumping back from the table as if it were electrified. Bradley dropped the pen. It rolled across the table, leaking black ink onto the cheap plastic surface, a black stain spreading like the corruption in his soul. They all stared at me. For a moment, nobody breathed. The silence was thick, heavy, suffocating. They looked at my white suit. They looked at my clear eyes. They looked at the lack of a cane, the lack of a stoop, the lack of the frailty I had feigned for so long. I did not shout. I did not rage. I stepped into the room, letting the door close softly behind me, shutting out the bright Hawaiian sun. I stood at the head of the table, looking down at them. I looked at the sweat on Bradley's forehead. I looked at the fear in Monica's eyes. I looked at the calculation in Sterling's gaze. Then, I raised my hands, and I began to clap. Clap, clap, clap. The sound was slow, rhythmic, and terrifyingly loud in the small room. It was not applause. It was a death knell. $120,000, I said, my voice low but filling every corner of the room. That is what I spent on this vacation. First-class tickets, presidential suites, private charters. I took a step closer to Bradley. He was frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the water. $120,000 for a theater ticket, I continued, my eyes boring into his. And I have to say, looking at this pathetic scene, at the cheap forgery, at the trembling hands, at the desperate betrayal, the performance was cheaper than I expected. "Dad?" Bradley whispered. It was a broken sound. "Dad, I can explain." "You can explain?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. "Please, do explain." "Explain why you just signed my name to a document selling a $50 million company for $5 million. Explain why you told this man I was mentally incompetent. Explain why you and your wife were discussing the benefits of my early death on the balcony last night." Bradley's face drained of all color. He looked at the smoke detector on the ceiling. He realized. He finally realized. You were watching?" he stammered. "I am always watching, Bradley," I said. "Did you really think you could steal my kingdom while I was still sitting on the throne? Did you really think I was that blind? I built that company from a single truck. I negotiated with unions, with mobs, with politicians. And you thought you could outsmart me with a fake watch and a forged signature?" I turned to Sterling. The con man was already moving, sliding his briefcase off the table, trying to stand up, trying to edge toward the door. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," I commanded. The authority in my voice was absolute. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," Sterling said, his smooth voice wavering. "I was led to believe that Mr. Bradley here had full legal authority. If that is not the case, then this contract is null and void. I will just be going." "You are not going anywhere," Catherine's voice cut in from the doorway. She stepped into the room, flanked by the police officers. The room suddenly felt very small. "Mr. Isaac Sterling, also known as Isaac Stone, also known as Robert Miller," Catherine recited, reading from her tablet. "We have a warrant for your arrest from the FBI for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. And adding to that list, We now have video evidence of you knowingly soliciting a forged signature on a federal contract. Sterling sank back into his chair. The shark had been harpooned. Monica let out a wail. It was a high, piercing sound of pure terror. She lunged toward me, grabbing the sleeve of my jacket. "George! Dad! Please!" She was sobbing, tears streaming down her face, ruining the makeup she had applied so carefully for her life of crime. "I didn't know! I told him not to do it! He forced me! He said we had no choice! I am a victim here!" I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I looked at her with the same detachment I would use to look at a stain on the carpet. "Get your hands off me," I said quietly. She recoiled as if I had struck her. "You told him not to do it?" I asked. "I seem to recall you saying, 'Sign the paper, Bradley. We can go to Monaco. We don't need him.' My memory is quite sharp, Monica, unlike your conscience." I turned back to Bradley. He was not crying. He was shaking. He looked at the police officers. He looked at the handcuffs on their belts. He looked at the document on the table with his forgery still wet in black ink. "Dad," he whispered, "don't let them take me. Please. I am your son." I looked at him. I looked for the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I looked for the teenager I taught to drive. I looked for the man I had hoped he would become. But all I saw was a stranger. A stranger who had left me at an airport. A stranger who had wished me dead. "You stopped being my son the moment you told me to go home," I said. My voice did not waver. "You wanted to be a businessman, Bradley? You wanted to make big deals? Well, this is how business works. You made a bad investment. You wagered your freedom against my intelligence, and you lost." I nodded to the officers. "Officers, take them." The room erupted into chaos. Monica screamed as the officer grabbed her arm. She kicked and thrashed, shouting that she was a mother, that she was innocent, that she was rich. Bradley did not fight. He stood up slowly, his legs weak. He held out his hands. When the cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he flinched. I watched them being led out. I watched them pass me. Bradley looked at me one last time. His eyes were filled with a terrible realization. He wasn't crying because he was sorry. He was crying because he knew, deep down, that he deserved this. As they were dragged into the hallway, leaving me alone in the room with Catherine and the empty table, I looked down at the contract. I picked up the pen Bradley had dropped. I capped it. Catherine walked over and picked up the document. She looked at the signature. "A good forgery," she noted. "But not good enough," I said. I walked out of the conference room, stepping back into the bright Hawaiian sun. The air smelled of hibiscus and salt. I took a deep breath. It was over. The tumor had been removed. The pain was still there, the phantom pain of a limb lost, but the infection was gone. I was alone. But standing there, in my white suit, with the ocean breeze on my face, I realized that being alone was far better than being surrounded by wolves. I had paid a high price for this vacation, but as I watched the police cruiser pull away from the resort entrance, lights flashing, I knew it was the best money I had ever spent. The silence that followed the arrest of Isaac Sterling was heavy, broken only by the sound of the police radio crackling on the officer's shoulder. The man my son had looked up to, the man he had called a visionary just an hour ago, was now slumped against the wall, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pressed against the cheap drywall. The FBI agents who had been waiting in the lobby, coordinated by Catherine, stepped into the room to take custody. They didn't speak to Bradley. They didn't speak to Monica. They treated them like furniture, obstacles to be moved around to get to the real prize. I walked over to the table where the contract lay. The ink on Bradley's forgery was starting to dry, a permanent record of his betrayal. I picked up the paper. It felt light, insignificant. It was hard to believe that this single sheet of wood pulp had been enough to destroy a family. I turned to Bradley. He was still standing there, his hands cuffed behind his back, staring at the empty chair where Sterling had sat. He looked like a man who had woken up from a dream to find himself in a burning building. "You picked a bad partner, son," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "Isaac Sterling has been under investigation for 2 years. He runs a Ponzi scheme targeting distressed heirs. He never had $5 million. He was going to take your signature, use it to leverage a loan against my company assets, and then disappear before the bank realized the fraud. You weren't selling the company, Bradley. You were handing him the keys to the vault so he could rob it and leave you holding the bag." Bradley looked up at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with tears and shock. "But he didn't," he whispered. "He had the cashier's check." I signaled to Catherine. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a photocopy of the check Sterling had flashed earlier. She held it up to the light. "A forgery," Catherine said, her voice crisp and professional. "A high-quality one, but a forgery nonetheless. The routing number belongs to a defunct bank in Iceland. If you had deposited this, you would have been arrested for check fraud within 24 hours. Bradley's knees gave way. He collapsed into the plastic chair, his head bowing low. He wasn't mourning the loss of the money. He was mourning the loss of his own intelligence. He realized, finally, that he wasn't a player in the game. He was the mark. But the show wasn't over. I turned my gaze to the corner of the room. Monica was standing there, pressed into the corner as if she were trying to merge with the paint. She had been silent since the handcuffs went on, her eyes darting back and forth between me, the police, and her husband. I could see the gears turning in her head. I could see the survival instinct kicking in, overriding everything else. "Monica," I said. She jumped. She smoothed her hair with trembling hands and took a hesitant step forward. She forced a smile. It was a grotesque expression, filled with terror and fake warmth. "George," she said, her voice shaking. "Oh, George, thank God you were here. Thank God you stopped him." I stared at her. "Stopped him?" I asked. "Yes." She took another step, gaining confidence as the lie formed in her mouth. She pointed a manicured finger at Bradley, her husband, the father of her children. "He is crazy, George. I told him. I begged him not to do it. I told him, we can't do this to your father. We can't sell the company." But he wouldn't listen. He was obsessed. He threatened me. Bradley raised his head. He looked at his wife with pure confusion. "Monica? What are you talking about? You said we should go to Monaco. You handed me the pen." "Liar!" Monica shrieked. She turned to the police officers, her eyes wide and pleading. "He is lying! He is trying to drag me down with him. I am a victim here. I didn't sign anything. Look at the paper. My name isn't on it." She rushed toward me, reaching out as if to hug me, but stopped short when she saw the look in my eyes. "Dad, please," she whimpered, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know how he is. You know he has a gambling problem. He forced me to come on this trip. He forced me to stay in that horrible room. I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to call you, but he took my phone. I am innocent, George. I am family." I looked at Bradley. He was staring at her as if he had never seen her before. The betrayal on his face was absolute. He had sold his soul to give her the life she wanted, and now, at the first sign of trouble, she was carving him up to feed him to the wolves. I looked back at Monica. I let the silence stretch out, letting her think, just for a second, that her performance was working. "You are right, Monica," I said softly. "Your name is not on the contract." She let out a breath, a sob of relief. "Exactly. See? I had nothing to do with it." "But," I continued, my voice hardening like concrete setting in the sun, "my security team recorded the audio from your balcony last night, and from the conference room this morning." Monica froze. "I heard you, Monica. I heard you tell him that my death would be convenient. I heard you tell him to sign the paper so you could flee to Switzerland. I heard you call me a bitter old bat who deserved to die alone." Her face went pale, the blood draining away so fast she looked like a corpse. "And," I added, taking a step closer to her, "I also heard you at the airport. Just go home, George. You are a burden. Do you remember that?" "No," she whispered. "I didn't mean it. I was stressed." "You weren't stressed, Monica. You were honest. For the first time in your life, you showed me exactly who you are. You are a parasite. You latched onto my son because you thought he was a golden ticket. And now that the gold is gone, you are trying to cut him loose." I turned to the police officer. "Officer, is she under arrest?" The officer shook his head. "Not at this time, Mr. Caldwell. She didn't sign the forgery. Her moral crimes are heinous, but legally, she is just a witness." Monica let out a laugh. It was a hysterical, high-pitched sound. "See? See? I am free. You can't touch me." She grabbed her purse and straightened her dress. She looked at Bradley with pure disgust. "Have fun in prison, loser. I am going back to the hotel. I am ordering a spa treatment to wash the stench of you off me. And then, I am booking a flight home. George, I expect you to handle the ticket. It is the least you can do after traumatizing me." She turned to walk out the door, her chin held high, her arrogance returning in a rush. She thought she had won. She thought that because she wasn't in handcuffs, she was safe. "Monica," I said. She stopped at the door and looked back, annoyed. "What now?" "You seem to be under a misapprehension," I said. "You think you are going back to the hotel." "I am," she sneered. "I have rights." "You have nothing," I corrected her. "I spoke to the general manager 5 minutes ago. You have been formally evicted from the resort. You are not a guest. You are a trespasser. If you set foot in the lobby, you will be arrested." Her mouth dropped open. "But my clothes, my jewelry, my trunks." "Ah, yes, the Louis Vuitton trunks." I smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "They are currently sitting on the curb outside the service entrance, along with your handbags and your shoes. I believe it looks like it might rain later, so you might want to hurry." She stared at me, her bravado crumbling. "But how am I supposed to get to the airport? I have no money. You canceled the cards." I shrugged. "I hear it is a nice walk. It is about 15 miles to the airport. You have legs, use them." "You can't do this," she screamed, stomping her foot like a child. "I am your daughter-in-law." "Not anymore," I said. "Bradley will be filing for divorce. It will be the first smart thing he has done in years. And since he has no assets, and you signed a prenuptial agreement that I insisted on, you leave with exactly what you brought into this family. Nothing. She looked at Bradley. He didn't look at her. He was looking at the floor, a single tear tracking through the sweat on his face. He finally saw her. He finally understood. "George, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I have nowhere to go. I have no cash. How will I eat?" I walked over to the table. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it at her feet. "Here," I said, "grab a sandwich at the airport. If you hurry, you might catch a standby flight." But I wouldn't bet on it. She looked at the money on the floor. For a second, her pride warred with her greed. Greed won. She snatched the bill from the ground, clutching it in her fist. "I hate you," she hissed. "I hope you die alone." "I am already alone, Monica," I said. "And it is the most peaceful I have felt in years. Now get out, before I have the officers add a trespassing charge to your souvenir collection." She turned and ran. I heard her heels clattering down the hallway, a frantic, uneven rhythm. Then the heavy exit door slammed shut, and she was gone. The room was quiet again. Just me, Catherine, the police, and my son. Bradley looked up at me. He looked at the closed door where his wife had just abandoned him. Then he looked at his handcuffs. "She is gone," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "she is. And you are still here." He let out a long, shuddering breath. "I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry." "I know," I said. "And that is why I am giving you a choice." "A choice?" He looked hopeful. A spark of light returned to his eyes. You are going to bail me out?" "No," I said firmly. "I am not bailing you out. You committed a crime, Bradley. You tried to sell my legacy. There are consequences for that. Real-world consequences." I motioned to Catherine. She stepped forward and placed a new document on the table. It wasn't a contract. It was a plea deal. But not one with the court. One with me. "Option 1, I said. You go with these officers. We press charges. With the amount of money involved and the forgery, you are looking at 5 to 10 years. You will be a felon. You will lose your voting rights. You will lose your freedom." Bradley flinched. "And option 2? I tapped the paper on the table. "Option 2. You sign this document. It is a full confession and a voluntary termination of your parental rights to the trust fund. You agree to stay in Hawaii. You agree to work. I have a friend who runs a landscaping business on the North Shore. It is hard work, minimum wage. You dig ditches. You cut grass. You sweat." Bradley stared at me. "You want me to be a gardener?" "I want you to be a man," I said. "You have spent 40 years living on my name. It is time you built your own. You work for 1 year. You pay off the hotel debt. You live in a small apartment. You learn the value of $1. If you do that, if you survive a year without calling me for money, then, and only then, will I consider dropping the charges." He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the document. He looked at his soft, manicured hands that had never done a day of hard labor in his life. "I can't do manual labor, Dad," he whined. "My back." "Your back is fine," I snapped. "It is your spine that is missing. Find it." I turned to the officer. "Uncuff one hand. Let him sign." The officer looked at me, then at Bradley. He unlocked the right cuff. Bradley rubbed his wrist. He picked up the pen, the same pen he had used to try and sell my company. He hesitated. He looked at the door, hoping Monica would come back and save him. but nobody was coming. He signed. It wasn't a forgery this time. It was shaky, messy, and defeated. But it was his name. I nodded to the officer. "Take the cuffs off. He is staying." As the metal clicked open, Bradley slumped against the table, sobbing into his hands. It was a pathetic sight, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. He was at rock bottom, and rock bottom is the only solid foundation to build on. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. "Goodbye, son," I said. "I hope to meet the man you become." I walked out into the hallway, leaving the weeping boy behind. I had one more stop to make before I went to the airport. I needed a drink. And I knew exactly which credit card I was going to use to pay for it. My own. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, sealing the room in a silence that was louder than the screaming had been. The chaos of the arrest, the shrieking of my daughter-in-law, the clinking of handcuffs on Sterling, it all vanished, leaving behind the sterile hum of the air conditioning. I stood at the head of the plastic table, looking down at the man who shared my DNA. Bradley was slumped in the chair, his hands resting on his knees, his expensive linen shirt soaked with the cold sweat of a man who knows he is standing on the edge of a cliff. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, swollen, and filled with a childlike terror that I had not seen since he was 5 years old and broke my favorite vase. But he was not 5 anymore. He was 40. And the thing he had broken was not a vase. It was the fundamental bond between a father and a son. "She is not coming back," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty room. "You know that, don't you? She followed the money. And since the money is standing here in a white suit and you are sitting there in handcuffs, she made her choice." Bradley let out a choked sob. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to prove I could make a deal. I wanted you to be proud of me." Proud. I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. "You wanted me to be proud, so you tried to steal the company I built with my bare hands. You wanted me to be proud, so you left me standing at an airport terminal like a piece of lost luggage. That is a strange definition of pride, son." I nodded to Catherine. She stepped forward, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply against the floor. She placed 2 documents on the table. One was thick, stapled, and formidable. The other was a single sheet of paper. "I am not going to lecture you, Bradley," I said, walking around the table until I stood directly behind him. "I am done with lectures. I have spent 40 years giving you advice, giving you chances, giving you safety nets. Today, I am giving you a choice." I placed my hand on the thick document. "Option 1, I said. You go with the officers waiting in the hallway. We proceed with the charges: fraud, forgery, embezzlement, attempted grand larceny. With the video evidence and the document you just signed, Catherine estimates you will get 7 years, maybe 5 with good behavior. But you will be a felon. You will never vote again. You will never hold a corporate job again. You will spend the next decade in a cage, thinking about the millions you threw away." Bradley flinched as if I had hit him. He looked at the thick stack of papers, visualizing the bars, the orange jumpsuit, the end of his life as he knew it. "I can't go to prison, Dad," he whispered. "I wouldn't survive. You know I wouldn't. Please." "What is the other option?" "Anything. I will do anything." I slid the single sheet of paper in front of him. "Option 2, I said. This is a confession. It states that you voluntarily relinquish all claims to the Caldwell Family Trust. It removes you from my will entirely. It strips you of your title, your allowance, and your future inheritance. You walk away with zero. Bradley looked at the paper, his eyes widening. You are disowning me. I am not finished, I interrupted. If you sign this, I will ask the district attorney to suspend the charges. But there is a condition. You cannot leave Hawaii. He blinked, confused. What? You owe the Four Seasons Resort $18,000, I said. And since I am not paying it, and you have no money, you are going to work it off. Work it off, he stammered. I have spoken to a friend of mine. He owns a landscaping company on the North Shore. He needs strong backs to dig irrigation ditches and clear brush. He has agreed to hire you. Minimum wage. You will live in the employee dormitory. It is a small room with a bunk bed and no air conditioning. You will work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Every paycheck will go directly to the hotel until your debt is paid in full. Bradley looked at me with horror. You want me to be a laborer? You want me to dig ditches in the sun? Dad, I have a degree in business. I am a Caldwell. You are a criminal, Bradley, I snapped. And right now, the only difference between you and the men digging those ditches is that they are honest, and you are not. But Dad, please, he begged, reaching out to grab my hand. I pulled it away before he could touch me. Look at me. I am your son. I am your flesh and blood. How can you be so cruel? How can you sentence your own child to manual labor? We are family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I looked down at him. I looked at the tears streaming down his face, the quivering of his lip. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. It was the same face he made when he wanted a new car, or when he needed bail money, or when he wanted me to cover his gambling losses. For decades, that face had worked. It had triggered my guilt. It had triggered my instinct to protect. But today, looking at him, I felt nothing. The well was dry. Family, I said, my voice quiet but cutting. You want to talk about family? Yes, he cried. We are family. You can't just throw me away. I leaned down, bringing my face inches from his. My family did not die in this room, Bradley. My family died at Terminal 4 at LAX. He froze. Family died when you looked at your watch, saw that you were running late for your first-class flight, and decided that your father was expendable baggage. Family died when you told me to go home because I was an inconvenience to your vacation. You didn't care about my blood then. You didn't care about my flesh when you were sipping champagne at 30,000 feet, while I was taking a lonely car ride back to an empty house. I stood up straight, adjusting my jacket. You killed the father who protected you, I said. The man standing in front of you now is just the CEO of the company you tried to steal. And as a CEO, I am cutting my losses. Bradley stared at me. He saw the truth in my eyes. He saw that the door was closed and locked, and the key had been melted down. I turned to Catherine. Give him the pen. She handed him the cheap ballpoint pen from the table. Bradley took it. His hand was shaking so violently that he could barely hold it. He looked at the thick document that meant prison. He looked at the single sheet that meant poverty and hard labor. He looked at the door, but Monica was not coming back. He looked at the ceiling, but God was not intervening. He was alone. I can't do manual labor, he whimpered one last time. "It will kill me." "It won't kill you," I said. "It might actually make a man out of you. Something I clearly failed to do. Sign it." The command cracked like a whip. Bradley hunched over the table. A tear dripped from his nose onto the paper. He pressed the pen to the line. He wrote his name. It was not the confident, flourishing signature he had used on the forgery. It was small, cramped, and defeated. He finished. He dropped the pen. He buried his face in his hands and wept. It was the sound of a child who realizes that playtime is over, forever. Catherine picked up the paper. She checked the signature. She nodded to me. "It is done," she said. I looked at my son one last time. He was a broken heap in a plastic chair. Part of me, the part that remembered teaching him to catch a baseball, wanted to reach out, wanted to touch his shoulder, wanted to tell him it would be okay. But I killed that part of me. I had to, because if I didn't, he would consume me. I turned my back on him. "Goodbye, Bradley," I said. "Dad, wait!" he choked out. I did not wait. I walked to the door. I opened it. The bright light of the lobby spilled in. I stepped through, and I let the door close behind me. I walked through the lobby of the resort, past the tourists in their floral shirts, past the happy families heading to the beach. I felt lighter. The weight I had been carrying for 40 years, the weight of his failures, the weight of his entitlement, was gone. I walked out to the valet stand where my car was waiting. The sun was shining. The ocean was blue. I was alone, but for the first time in a long time, I was free. I had lost a son, yes, but I had kept my dignity. And in the end, that was the only currency that really mattered. The Gulf Stream climbed steeply, banking left over the azure waters of the Pacific. I sat in the single window seat, holding a glass of scotch that I had poured but had no intention of drinking. Below me, the island of Maui was shrinking. It looked deceptively peaceful from 30,000 feet. The lush green valleys, the golden beaches, the turquoise ring of the ocean. It looked like paradise. But I knew better. Down there, in the sweltering heat of the North Shore, my son was currently being issued a shovel and a pair of work gloves. He was learning, 40 years too late, that the earth does not yield its fruit to those who only know how to take. I expected to feel heavy. I expected to feel the crushing weight of guilt that society tells parents they should feel when they discipline their children. But as the island disappeared behind a bank of clouds, I realized that the tightness in my chest, the one that had been there since the airport in Los Angeles, was gone. It had vanished, replaced by a strange, hollow lightness. It was the feeling of a wound finally being stitched closed. Catherine sat across from me, typing on her laptop. She stopped and looked up. "Are you okay, George?" she asked. "I am better than okay," I said. "I am awake." I looked out at the horizon, where the blue of the sea met the blue of the sky. I thought about Sarah. I thought about how she used to slip extra money into Bradley's pockets when she thought I wasn't looking. She loved him so much that she crippled him. And I had let it happen. I had been so busy building an empire that I forgot to build a man. But today, I had started the construction project. It was going to be ugly. It was going to be painful. But it was necessary. "Catherine," I said, turning away from the window, "I want to set up a new trust. For Bradley? She asked, pausing her typing. No, I said firmly. Bradley has his path now. If he survives the year, if he learns to stand on his own 2 feet, we will talk. But this money is for something else. I want you to liquidate the vacation home in Aspen. I want you to sell the yacht. Take all of it, every cent, and start a foundation in Sarah's name. What is the mission statement? She asked. Vocational training, I said. For kids who have nothing. For kids who want to work but don't have the tools. I want to fund scholarships for mechanics, for carpenters, for plumbers. I want to invest in builders, Catherine, not heirs. She smiled. It was a genuine smile. I will draft the paperwork by the time we land. I leaned back in the soft leather seat. The hum of the engines was a soothing lullaby. I closed my eyes. I saw Bradley's face, tear-stained and terrified. It hurt. Of course it hurt. He was my blood. But sometimes love isn't about giving someone everything they want. Sometimes love is taking away everything they have so they can finally see who they really are. I thought about the empty house waiting for me in Los Angeles. It would be quiet. There would be no demands for money, no fake family dinners, no shallow conversations about status. It would be just me. And for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't scare me. It felt like a fresh start. I took a sip of the scotch. It burned, warm and grounding. I lost a son back there on that island, I whispered to the empty air. I lost the illusion of a family. I lost the dream of a happy retirement surrounded by grandchildren. I looked down at my hands. They were old, spotted with age, but they were steady. They were the hands of a man who had taken back control of his own life. I lost a son, I thought, as the plane turned toward the mainland. But I found my dignity. And looking back at the last 48 hours, at the lies exposed and the justice served, I knew one thing for certain. It was a bargain. I learned that being a provider does not mean being a doormat. For 40 years, I thought love meant giving without condition. But I realized that love without boundaries only breeds entitlement. Cutting ties with my own son was the most painful decision of my life, yet it was the only path to peace. True family is not about shared blood. It is about shared respect. If you are ever forced to choose between your dignity and a relationship that drains you, choose dignity every time. You are not responsible for carrying people who are determined to break your back. If you believe that respect must be earned and that justice is worth fighting for, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven Bradley, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.